Well, happy Tuesday. I wanted to jump back into some sermon scraps as we dive back into Revelation. So we were in Revelation 13 this past Sunday. And as we're entering it again in this fall, I just wanted to take a minute and talk about, first of all, what is the overview of Revelation? What's the best way for us to faithfully interpret it? And then why did I come up with, or where did I come up with the idea that the beasts are referring to governmental systems? So first, the overview. When I preached the overview of Revelation back in February, I said there's basically 5 approaches that people have proposed for the primary way to interpret Revelation. There's futurism, which it is all about the future. There's preterism, which means it's all about the past. There's historicism, which is referring to things that are progressively fulfilled throughout history. There's idealism, which is the belief that this is referring to like ongoing struggles between God and Satan, between the saints and the earth dwellers, that term that John uses regularly throughout Revelation. And then eclectic, which is taking bits and pieces from all of them together. Now, I have leaned slightly towards a historical and idealistic view in my own interpretation as I've read and studied what this is talking about. And I think part of what we need to do in order to get that is to remember that we need to do biblical theology as we're faithfully interpreting this. So what are the biblical events that John is referring to and that would have been understood to a first century context? Now, what most people have read or thought or like a lot of the books that have come out in relation to Revelation are what has been dubbed pop dispensationalism. That's not at all on the list that I talked about last week. Like books like Left Behind would be in this vein of pop dispensationalism. That argument does a really, really bad job of faithfully interpreting the text. It doesn't take into account any of the historical, cultural, or textual evidences. It instead tends to read Revelation like a newspaper. Newspaper reading, just like these are the events that are going to take place literally in front of us. Instead, we're supposed to read Revelation as a historical apocalyptic letter. Remember, apocalyptic is a specific genre. And Revelation isn't the only apocalyptic first century Jewish text that we have. There's multiple other ones that we have as well. And a large part of the reason that I believe this is because of church history. The way Revelation has primarily been understood throughout church history is not dispensational. It's not exclusively future oriented. There are obviously future elements to it. Like it talks about Jesus establishing his reign on earth, and that obviously hasn't happened yet. So there's things that are still yet to come, but there are some things that it describes that are currently taking place around us right now. That's why I would argue that this is the best way for us to faithfully interpret Revelation, is not exclusively future-oriented, but referring to all of this. So in all of that, my plea for you is please don't make this a divisive issue. There are all sorts of ways of interpreting this text that disagree with me, that disagree with my approach to it. That's why I always talk about this theological triage. We need to understand that our interpretation of Revelation is not a primary issue of doctrinal importance. It's important. It matters. It has implications for us today, but it is not of primary importance. The core of all the interpretations of Revelation are the same, though. Jesus reigns supreme, and someday he's going to come back and fix the broken world that we live in today. So that should give us hope and encouragement to continue persevering in the midst of the world that we live in today. So the second thing I wanted to talk about today is why did I believe and why did I make the argument that the beasts are referring to governmental systems opposed to God? So just one example of a different interpretation of that. Left Behind argues that the beast in Revelation 13, the beasts are referring to 2 specific governmental entities, or they actually call them the Antichrist in the Left Behind books. And I don't think that's what's talking about. Like, again, First John talks about there are many Antichrists that have come. At some point, there will be a final Antichrist, the last one that is allowed to exist on earth before Jesus comes back. I don't think this is necessarily just exclusively referring to that position. So why do I think that? Because it's referring back to that prophecy that we saw in Daniel chapter 7. So Daniel 7, the picture, the description that Daniel is given there has been fulfilled in 4 subsequent civilizations. I shared those on Sunday. And here in Revelation, the grotesque imagery like throws all those features together and then demonstrates how governments who don't obey God become like beasts. And same thing for those who follow and ascribe to that whole belief system. And the reality is everyone worships something. Every human is just created with this innate desire to worship, like our hearts are directed towards transcendence, like a desire for connecting to something much bigger than ourselves. And then what follows from there is then we become like what we worship. So those who worship on the altar of politics will end up becoming beast-like. That's some of where my encouragement, this political season, is don't become overly divisive. Don't divide with your brothers and sisters in the church over which party they're voting for. I have my own specific issues on that and my own leanings and tendencies. I'm going to vote a specific way, but that is not a culture, a marker of Christian faithfulness. Like there's different interpretations and ways that we can engage this. So let's not make a primary or a divisive issue over something that the Bible gives room and nuance and charity on. And I think it's important for us as well to remember that governments do look oppressive and intimidating. Like the beasts that John is describing here almost feel like slightly overwhelming. I thought of a couple recent examples of this. Think of the Russian incursion into Ukraine. Everything I read had said that it would be a short, like very quick thing because of how powerful Russia is. Russia looks intimidating. And here we are multiple years later, and Ukraine has primarily really held their ground, and now they're starting to advance back into Russia. It's just amazing that even though these governments look so impressive, they look scary, deep down they're not. Think of the Hamas attack on Israel in October. Similarly, Hamas looked really formidable, but honestly, in the midst of the war since then, it's been revealed that Hamas is pretty cowardly in the way that they're approaching the response from Israel. They're hiding behind women and children. They're hiding underneath hospitals and in some of the tunnels that they've dug over there. That's a godless demonstration of what it means to be following the beast. It's all about power and control and influence, and that's not the way of the Lamb. So my encouragement through Revelation 13 is don't fall prey to the allure and draw of these worldly institutions. Instead, what we as Christians are called to do is to follow the way of the slaughtered Lamb, who calls us to live a way of life that actually leads to life to the full. That's what Jesus promised us. It's not beast-like. It is full human flourishing. So that's it for today. Up next, so our classes are starting up this week, 9 a.m. We'll have 3 adult classes, Echoes of Faith, which is a study in church history, Art of Marriage, which is a class on marriage, and then Habits for the Household, which is a class on parenting. So the Echoes of Faith will meet in the fellowship hall. Art of Marriage and Habits for the Household will meet upstairs in the adult classrooms. We'll also have kids and youth ministries at 9 a.m., so classes will be offered for everyone starting this fall, which I'm really excited to see. If you have any questions about those, feel free to reach out to me, and we will be continuing in Revelation next week with Revelation chapter 14. Blessings on your week.